I entered this world on the 27th day of January in 1756 within a modest third-floor apartment above a shop on Salzburg's Getreidegasse Street. The room held the scent of beeswax polish on worn floorboards, and the faint tang of river mist drifting through the leaded glass. My father Leopold's violin case rested against the wall, its leather straps softened by years of travel. Anna Maria, my mother, hummed a lullaby low in her throat, her hands warm against my cheek. I was baptized the following day at Salzburg Cathedral. Beneath vaulted ceilings damp with centuries of candle smoke, the stone font felt cool against my skin as the priest spoke my full name, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, each syllable echoing in the chill air. My sister Nannerl, already 6 years old, watched with bright eyes from beside our mother. She traced the carved, wooden saints on the pew with small, curious fingers. Our household revolved around the steady rhythm of my father's duties as deputy Kapellmeister. He served the prince, archbishop faithfully, his music a thread woven into the city's daily life. The apartment buzzed with constant practice, Nannerl's clear notes rising above, the clatter of market carts below. Her harpsichord stood near the window, where dust motes danced in slanted sunlight. My father filled a leather-bound notebook with minuets and exercises, his ink-stained fingers turning pages slowly. By the time I was 5, he transcribed my first compositions onto those lined sheets. The paper smelled of lamp oil and dried ink, the notes forming under his careful guidance. I remember the smooth ivory of the harpsichord keys beneath my palms, their sound clear and bright as morning bells. Nannerl and I practiced side by side, our chairs pulled close to share the single candle's light. The city's church bells marked our hours, their chimes blending with our scales and arpeggios. Leopold listened with patient attention, correcting a finger position with a gentle touch. He never raised his voice, only demonstrated again until the phrase flowed true. The notebook became our shared world, filled with his neat script and our hesitant attempts. Winter mornings found us huddled near the stove, breath visible in the cold air as we worked through new pieces. Summer brought open windows, the scent of baking bread mixing with the scent of rosin on violin bows. My father's dedication was a quiet force, shaping our days without demand or haste. The leaded glass held a tiny flaw near the top right pane, a bubble of trapped air from the glassmaker's furnace. The harpsichord occupied the corner, farthest from the street noise, its dark wood deepened by years of care. Sunlight traced the grain of its surface each afternoon, warming the keys where small hands had pressed countless times. A thin layer of dust settled on the soundboard when we slept, brushed away each morning with a soft cloth. The instrument smelled of aged spruce and the faint metallic tang of its brass strings. Its legs were worn smooth where chairs scraped against them during long practice hours. The pedal mechanism creaked softly with each depression, a sound as familiar as breathing. Faint scratches marked the wood near middle C, testaments to eager fingers learning their place. On quiet evenings, the strings hummed long after the last note, vibrating through the floorboards. This room held all the beginnings, the air thick with possibility and beeswax. Nannerl's talent bloomed early, her playing precise and joyful. She learned quickly, her laughter mingling with the music she created. Leopold nurtured her gift with the same care he gave my own. He arranged our first performances before Salzburg's nobility in the palace antechambers. Rich tapestries absorbed the sound, the candlelight glinting off gilded frames. I recall the rough texture of velvet chairs and the taste of sweet wine offered after playing. Our father watched us closely, pride tempered by his quiet vigilance. These gatherings were our introduction to the wider world beyond Getredegasse. The children of counts and bishops listened wide-eyed, their stillness a new kind of music. Leopold documented every detail. In letters sent across Europe, his neat script filling pages with our progress. He described my compositions with measured pride, never exaggeration. The household routine centered entirely on music. Meals timed around practice sessions. Even sleep felt woven into the day's melodies. Dreams filled with harmonies. This small apartment above a shop contained the entire universe for me then. The journey ahead remained unseen, its contours hidden like the river beyond the city walls. Salzburg's bells marked time, steady and sure as we played on. My father, Leopold, nurtured both Nannerl's and my musical talents with structured lessons and patient encouragement from our earliest years. He created a comprehensive musical notebook beginning in 1760, where he wrote exercises and small compositions for us to practice on the harpsichord. I remember the smooth ivory keys cool beneath my small fingers each morning as Nannerl and I sat side by side on the small wooden stool before the instrument. Sunlight traced the grain of the instrument's dark wood, warming the keys where tiny fingers had practiced scales and minuets. The gentle rhythm of breathing from the children resting nearby completed the peaceful scene. This domestic space, filled with focused learning and familial affection, nurtured the first notes of genius. My father's hand would guide mine across the keyboard, his touch firm yet kind, teaching me to feel the weight of each note. The scent of beeswax polish mixed with the dry smell of sheet music stacked neatly on the stand. In London, Mr. Bach showed me how a melody could sigh like a person leaning on a windowsill. His fingers moved across the keyboard with a lightness I had never seen, turning complex passages into something that felt like laughter. The London fog pressed against the window panes during our lessons, muffling the sounds of carriages on the street below. I copied his grace into my own playing, feeling how the left hand could dance like water while the right sang clear and true. This contrasted sharply with the stricter counterpoint my father demanded at home in Salzburg. The harpsichord stool stood before the instrument, its surface smoothed by small hands. Sunlight traced the grain of the instrument's dark wood, warming the keys where tiny fingers had practiced scales and minuets. The gentle rhythm of breathing from the children resting nearby completed the peaceful scene. This domestic space, filled with focused learning and familial affection, nurtured the first notes of genius. The tours began when I was 7 years old, carrying us across Germany, France, England, and the Netherlands in a constant rumble of carriage wheels. The roads were often rough, jolting the instrument cases strapped to the coach roof. I performed for kings and queens, in grand halls lit by countless candles, their heat warming my face as I played. The scent of beeswax and candle smoke filled royal chambers where tapestries absorbed every note I produced. My hands grew tired from constant playing, yet the music felt like a warm companion through the long journeys. In Germany, a fever gripped me, making my legs ache as we traveled through the cold forests. Later in London, abdominal typhus confined me to bed for weeks, the sheets damp with fever sweat. My mother sat beside me, her hand cool on my forehead, the room smelling faintly of vinegar and herbs. The London bedroom held the quiet rhythm of my shallow breaths during illness. Candle wax pooled softly on the nightstand, its scent mixing with the bitter taste of medicine in a chipped cup. Distant street noises faded into the hum of silence as sweat cooled on my skin. My mother's footsteps were muffled on the wooden floorboards outside the door. The illness lasted weeks, yet the music never left my mind, playing silently behind my closed eyes. After recovering, a gentleman named Barrington tested my sight, reading in a room lined with books. He placed unfamiliar sheet music before me, its ink still sharp and black on the page. I played the piece through without error, the notes flowing as naturally as breathing. He watched closely as I performed with covered eyes, my fingers finding the keys by memory alone. The room smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco as I improvised a fugue on demand. His careful notes confirmed what I already knew deep in my bones. The constant movement took its toll, but music remained my anchor through every hardship. Returning to Salzburg, I carried these experiences within me, like stones worn smooth by a river. The narrow streets felt familiar yet changed by my absence, the church bells sounding different after hearing so many foreign instruments. My father's notebook now contained not just exercises, but echoes of London fog and Parisian salons. I composed my first symphony in G minor, the notes reflecting the shadows of travel and the warmth of candlelit rooms. The key felt deep and serious, like the look in my father's eyes when he heard my new work. Performing for the Prince, Archbishop, I felt the weight of expectation in the hall's high ceilings and cold stone walls. The air carried the scent of polished wood and woolen coats as I played my concerto, the music weaving together what I had learned. My fingers remembered the smoothness of London, harpsichords, and the rough carriage seats across Germany. The subscription concerts in Vienna later demanded a balance between dazzling skill and clear structure. I shaped the D minor Concerto K, 46-6 with care, its melodies reaching out to the middle-class listeners in the audience. The hall buzzed with quiet conversation and the rustle of silk before the music began. My hands moved across the keys, connecting the lessons from childhood to this new stage. The gilded hall held the scent of beeswax and candle smoke, familiar yet grander than any room I knew as a boy. These pieces stood as counterpoints to the strict lessons of my youth, each note a conversation between past and present, the quiet discipline of his childhood practice. The Burgtheater in Vienna held a quiet dignity during evening performances. Candlelight flickered across gilded box, seats and deep red velvet upholstery. Wooden panels absorbed the murmur of the audience before the curtain rose. The scent of beeswax polish mingled with the faint aroma of woolen coats. Patrons settled into padded chairs, their silhouettes softened by the warm glow. Distant sounds of carriage wheels faded as the hall grew still. A single tuning note resonated from the orchestra pit below. Shadows danced gently across ornate ceiling frescoes depicting classical scenes. The air remained cool and still within the grand space. This room witnessed the birth of many 18th century musical innovations. Its simple elegance provided a focused environment for artistic expression. The theater's acoustics carried every note with "My hands remember the small" wooden stool before the harpsichord, its pure wood surface worn smooth by my small hands pressing the keys. Sunlight traced the dark wood grain of the instrument each morning, warming the ivory where I practiced scales until my fingers ached. The soft breathing of Nannerl resting nearby filled the quiet room, a steady rhythm beneath the minutes. We left Salzburg's narrow streets in 1763, the year I turned 7. The carriage wheels began their endless turning across German lands. My father's ledger recorded each town, each performance for dukes and counts. The roads were hard, the journeys long. Days blurred into weeks of rattling over frozen ruts and muddy tracks. The wooden seat grew cold beneath me, the wool blanket scratchy against my neck. I played for Empress Maria Theresa in Vienna, her children watching wide-eyed. The scent of beeswax and candle smoke clung to palace halls. We traveled through France where rain soaked the carriage canvas for days. My fingers stayed nimble despite the chills, the music a steady pulse inside me. The stool's curve fit my small frame perfectly, a familiar anchor in strange rooms. Erythema nodosum flared that winter in Munich, painful lumps beneath my skin. The carriage jolts made the H deeper, a constant throb in my legs. I played anyway. The notes clear even when my voice was weak. The harpsichord keys felt solid beneath my touch, a truth I could hold on to. The illness faded slowly as we moved toward Paris. The sign smelled of wet stone and coal smoke in the early mornings. My father's letters spoke of our schedule, the next court, the next city. The stool traveled with us, packed carefully in the carriage trunk. It sat before instruments in borrowed rooms across the continent. I saw kings nod along to my playing, their jeweled fingers tapping time. The sound of the harpsichord filled grand halls and modest parlors alike. Travel meant constant motion, never staying long in one place. The roads were hard. London welcomed us in 1764, with damp fog clinging to brick streets. The harpsichord in our lodgings had keys yellowed with age. I practiced while rain tapped steadily against the window panes. Daines Barrington visited one gray afternoon, his coat damp at the shoulders. He placed unfamiliar sheets before me, the ink still sharp on the page. I played them through without pause, the melodies unfolding naturally. He covered my eyes, handed me a violin, and asked for an improvised fugue. The notes came without thought, as if they lived already inside the wood. His quill scratched notes onto paper as I played, documenting each correct turn. The room held the smell of ink and old paper. Barrington's assessment felt like just another test, another room. The stool sat ready for me when the lawyer finally left. The coffee house near the Quai d'Ironton theater held the soft murmur of conversation one mild evening. Patrons sipped dark coffee from delicate porcelain cups, steam rising in the candlelight. Sheet music lay open on some tables, pages turning gently in the warm air. The scent of roasted beans mingled with beeswax polish on the worn floorboards. Street lamps cast long shadows through the tall windows onto the wooden boards. Distant carriage wheels faded as the city settled into its nightly rhythm. Gentle laughter punctuated the low hum of intellectual exchange among the regulars. Warmth radiated from the hearth where embers glowed softly in the grate. Time seemed to slow within these walls, measured by the turning of pages. London brought typhus the following year, a fever that held me bedded for weeks. The room smelled of vinegar and damp cloths. Nannerl played minuets softly on the harpsichord to soothe me. The stool stood empty in the corner, waiting. I recovered slowly, the music calling me back long before my strength returned. We traveled on to Holland where the canals glittered under a weak sun. The smallpox came later in Vienna, a terrible heat behind my eyes. My mother's hands were cool on my forehead, her voice a quiet anchor. The scars left on my face felt rough beneath my fingertips. Sight returned gradually. The harpsichord keys slowly regaining their shape. The stool welcomed me back as if no time had passed. Carriages averaged 3 miles per hour on those difficult roads. Italy followed, a land of warmer light and different melodies. The journey to Bologna took nearly 3 weeks over mountain passes. The air smelled of olive groves and sun-baked stone. I absorbed the Italian operas, the singers' long flowing lines. The stool sat before harpsichords in churches and palaces across the peninsula. My compositions grew richer, shaped by the new sounds around me. I joined the Accademia Philharmonica. After rigorous examinations in Bologna, the room held the scent of old parchment and candle wax. My hands traced the smooth wood of the stool during moments of doubt. Travel taught me to find music anywhere, even in a swaying carriage. The rhythm of the wheels sometimes matched the minuets in my head. Nannerl and I shared glances across crowded rooms, a silent understanding. My father's ledger filled with names of patrons and payments received. The stool's wood held the marks of my small hands, a quiet history. We returned to Salzburg with new music in our hearts and bones. The narrow street felt smaller after seeing so much of the world. The harpsichord in our home welcomed us back, its sound familiar. My fingers found the keys without thought, the music a constant companion. The stool remained before it, its surface worn even smoother. The journeys shaped my music more than any single lesson. Illnesses came and went, but the notes always returned. The carriage roads taught me patience, the slow turning of wheels. Music became my truest home, wherever the stool was placed. The harpsichord stood silent now, in the fading afternoon light. Dust motes danced in the single sunbeam cutting through the room. The dark wood grain held the memory of countless fingers pressing the keys. Candle wax dotted the surface near the keys, hardened into small amber beads. The smell of aged wood and rosin lingered in the still air. My reflection blurred slightly in the polished surface. An old man looking back. The silence held the echo of minuets played long ago. Fingertips traced the familiar curve of the wooden stool beside it. The room smelled faintly of beeswax and dry paper. A single sheet of music lay open, the notes waiting patiently. The stool's wood felt cool and solid beneath my hand. Travel wore the body thin, but music filled the spaces left behind. The roads were hard, but the music was harder to lose. I saw many courts, heard many languages, yet the harpsichord spoke always the same. The stool held me steady through every strange city and long road. It was just wood smoothed by small hands, warmed by sunlight. That simple thing carried me across a lifetime of journeys. The carriage wheels groaned against the frozen road between Mannheim and Paris, the wood frame shuddering with each rut. My breath fogged the small window pane as I watched snow-laden pines blur past in the gray morning light. A worn wool blanket scratched my neck, smelling faintly of horse and damp earth from the previous night's storm. The journey itself was arduous, requiring weeks on rough roads between major cultural centers. Leopold sat stiffly across from me, his fingers tapping an impatient rhythm on his knee. The silence inside the coach felt thick, broken only by the creak of harness leather and the driver's distant shout. I traced the grain of the wooden seat with my thumb, remembering London's smallpox. The smallpox left faint scars near my left eyebrow, a reminder of the Vienna fever in 1767. My hands stayed cold despite the gloves, the ink stains on my knuckles smudging as I shifted. The frozen fields stretched endlessly under a leaden sky, offering no comfort. We were chasing opportunities, always moving. Mannheim held a different chill, sharp and precise like the court musicians tuning their instruments. I stood in the elector's hall, listening to the violins cut through the morning air with startling clarity. The wood paneling absorbed echoes, making every note distinct and clean. My father negotiated terms while I observed the orchestra's discipline, their bows moving as one across the strings. I recall the scent of rosin and polished brass from the horns, the cool marble floor beneath my thin shoes. Blanchen Constanze's English maid brought tea in delicate porcelain cups, her hands steady despite the frost outside. Pedrillo served as Belmonte's servant, turned gardener within the Pasha's domain, a role I'd later shape in Vienna. Osman the overseer demanded a voice like thunder, a challenge I carried with me. The premiere occurred at Vienna's Burgtheater on July 16, 1782. But Mannheim taught me structure. I crafted intricate arias showcasing vocal virtuosity while maintaining clear narrative progression. Its success reflected growing confidence in theatrical composition. Audiences appreciated the exotic setting and vibrant character interactions. The blend of comic elements with genuine emotional depth felt right. Paris offered little warmth despite the summer sun. I lodged near the Seine, the river's muddy scent mixing with the dust of crowded streets. My mother, Anna Maria, fell ill in that cramped room, the plaster walls holding the stale smell of illness and weak tea. I played for indifferent patrons in grand salons, the harpsichord keys sticky under my fingers from spilled wine. The political environment remained tense despite surface stability across much of Europe. Rulers like Joseph Tuva enacted policies affecting cultural expression and daily existence. I navigated these conditions while establishing my reputation as a performer and composer. The quiet anticipation before the music began felt almost sacred. A single tuning note resonated from the orchestra pit below. Shadows danced gently across ornate ceiling frescoes depicting classical scenes. The air remained cool and still within the grand space. This room witnessed the birth of many 18th century musical innovations. Its simple elegance provided a focused environment for artistic expression. The theater's acoustics carried every note with remarkable clarity. Such spaces fostered a shared experience between performers and listeners. Time seemed to slow within these walls, measured by the turning of pages and the clink of saucers. Returning to Vienna felt like sinking into familiar waters. Public concerts grew substantially in popularity throughout this decade. I organized my own performances, the halls filling with patrons eager for new work. The Marriage of Figaro premiered in Vienna and quickly gained popularity across Europe. It demonstrated my ability to weave comedy with profound humanity. Figaro's success strengthened standing among aristocratic and public audiences. The commission for Don Giovanni arose directly from the enthusiastic reception in Prague. I composed a symphony in G minor catalogued as K. 183, its themes unfolding like a slow walk through moonlit gardens. The dark wood of my fortepiano felt smooth beneath my palms, the keys cool and responsive. A small wooden stool stood before the instrument, its surface smoothed by small hands. Sunlight traced the grain of the instrument's dark wood, warming the keys where tiny fingers had practiced scales and minuets. The gentle rhythm of breathing from the children resting nearby completed the peaceful scene. This domestic space, filled with focused learning and familial affection, nurtured the first notes of genius. Prague's Estates Theatre offered a refined atmosphere for musical gatherings. Wooden beams formed a vaulted ceiling above the main auditorium. Rich green velvet covered the seats, where patrons sat in attentive silence. Oil lamps cast a soft golden light across the ornate proscenium arch. The scent of aged wood and fresh paint lingered in the cool air. Outside the tall windows, the Vltava River flowed quietly beneath moonlight. Patrons' footsteps echoed softly on the stone floors before the performance. The stage backdrop depicted classical architectural elements in muted colors. Gentle drafts carried the faint sound of distant church bells. This space provided a stable foundation for artistic creation and reception. Its proportions ensured every voice carried clearly to the back rows. The Burgtheater in Vienna held a quiet dignity during evening performances. Candlelight flickered across gilded box seats and deep red velvet upholstery. Wooden panels absorbed the murmur of the audience before the curtain rose. The scent of beeswax polish mingled with the faint aroma of woolen coats. Patrons settled into padded chairs, their silhouettes softened by the warm glow. Distant sounds of carriage wheels faded as the hall grew still. A single tuning note resonated from the orchestra pit below. Shadows danced gently across ornate ceiling frescoes depicting classical scenes. The air remained cool and still within the grand space. This room witnessed the birth of many 18th century musical innovations. Its simple elegance provided a focused environment for artistic expression. The transition from courtly patronage to public concert life gradually reshaped musical careers. This shift became particularly evident during my years in Vienna. I remember the London visit introducing me to Johann Christian Bach's melodic style. This encounter demonstrably shaped structural elements within my earliest symphonies. Later trips to Mannheim and Paris proved equally formative. Detailed correspondence with my father documented the 1777 journey. Such letters provided rare insight into daily life and professional challenges. The quiet dignity of the building supported the music's emotional weight. Sleep often came late after these performances, the city lights dimming one by one as I finally closed the score. The work established my reputation in the imperial city immediately. This period marked a crucial step toward mature masterpieces. The gentle rhythm of breathing from the children resting nearby completed the peaceful scene. Such spaces fostered a shared experience between performers and listeners. Time seemed to slow within these walls, measured by the turning of pages and the clink of saucers. I shaped each note with care, knowing the journey was nearing its end. The road had been long, but the music remained. I remember the last days in Paris with my mother clearly, though the details have softened over the years like faded ink on worn paper. Her breathing grew shallow in that small room above the Rue du Gros Chenet, the air thick with the scent of vinegar and dried chamomile. I sat beside her narrow bed each evening, the rough wool of her shawl brushing my arm as I held her thin hand. Rain tapped steadily against the window pane, mixing with the distant clatter of carts on wet cobblestones. She rarely spoke, her voice a dry whisper lost beneath the city's murmur. The candlelight caught the hollows of her cheeks, her skin pale as bleached linen against the pillow. I played quiet minuets on the harpsichord to soothe her restless moments. The keys felt cold under my fingers, the sound thin and hollow in the cramped space. She had grown weaker since the journey from Salzburg, her strength ebbing like the Seine at low tide. I watched her chest rise and fall with each labored breath, counting them in the silence. The room held only a wash basin, a stool, and the bed where she lay. A single sprig of lavender wilted in a chipped cup on the windowsill. The apothecary visited twice daily, his leather bag smelling of bitter roots and burnt sugar. He mixed powders in a mortar, the sharp tang of crushed willow bark filling the air. I stirred broth over a low flame, the steam fogging the small window. Her eyes would open sometimes, fixed on the water stain spreading across the ceiling plaster. I traced the crack with my gaze, memorizing its path like a musical line. The bed linens grew damp with fever sweat, the sour smell clinging to everything. Nannerl's letters from home arrived sealed with wax, their hopeful words feeling distant as stars. I read them aloud, my voice steady despite the tightness in my throat. One afternoon, she reached for my wrist with surprising strength, her fingers cold as river stones. The street vendor's cry for fresh bread echoed below, a sound so ordinary it ached. A still life sat on the table near the window, a chipped porcelain bowl holding 3 wrinkled pears, their skin bruised to deep purple. Sunlight pooled on the wooden surface, highlighting the grain like fine embroidery. One pear had split open, revealing soft, honey-colored flesh swarming with tiny flies. The bowl's rim bore a hairline crack, barely visible unless tilted just so. Dust motes drifted through the golden light, catching on the fruit's sticky surface. I watched a fly crawl over the split skin, its wings glinting like dull metal. The room smelled of overripe sweetness and damp stone, a scent that lingered long after the fruit rotted away. Silence stretched, broken only by the fly's faint buzz against the glass. She passed just before dawn on the 3rd of July, 1778. The city still wrapped in pre-dawn mist. Her breathing simply stopped, leaving a quiet deeper than any I'd known. I covered her face with the thin sheet, the fabric catching on the rough weave of the pillow. The candle guttered low, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Outside, a cart rumbled past, its wheels splashing through puddles. I sat there until the street sounds grew louder. The baker's knock on the shutter below signaling morning. The letter to my father waited on the table, ink smudged where my hand had trembled. I described her final hours plainly, the words feeling inadequate as ash. Her empty bed seemed too large for the small room, the space where she'd lain now just cold sheets. I folded her shawl carefully, the wool still holding the faint scent of her lavender water. The funeral was held 3 days later in the St. Eustache Church, rain falling in steady sheets against the stained glass. I stood near the back, the damp wool of my coat clinging to my shoulders. The priest's voice echoed under the vaulted ceiling, blending with the drumming rain. 16 livres covered the coffin and the priest's fee, a sum noted precisely in my ledger. I walked home alone through the narrow streets, the signs swollen and dark. My hands were stiff from cold, the paper of the receipt damp in my pocket. The city felt both vast and suffocating, its noise a constant hum, beneath the silence she left behind. I lit a candle that night and played her favorite aria, the notes trembling in the empty room. The music filled the space where her presence had been, a fragile bridge across the quiet. A worn music box sat on the mantel, Its painted roses faded to soft pink. The brass key turned with a gritty resistance, winding the tiny cylinder within. When released, it played a fragile tune in B flat. The notes slightly out of tune, but recognizable as the gavotte we'd practiced together. The mechanism clicked softly between phrases, the sound like a ticking clock. Dust coated the carved wooden case, catching the lamplight in fine golden particles. I wound it each evening, the melody rising thin and sweet above the street sounds. The box had traveled with us from Salzburg, its hinges loose from years of use. Her initials, AMP, were carved faintly on the underside, the wood smooth from handling. The tune looped endlessly, a small comfort in the gathering dark. The carriage wheels settled into the familiar rhythm of Vienna's cobblestones that July evening in 1782. Candlelight spilled from tall windows onto wet streets, smelling of horse sweat and rain, damp stone. My fingers traced the worn velvet seat as we passed the Cade Rentnerter gate, its shadow stretching long across the square. The Burgtheater waited ahead, its facade glowing with warm yellow, light against the deepening blue sky. I carried the manuscript case close, the wood smooth beneath my palm after weeks of revision. Its contents bore the Cachel number 384, though such cataloging felt distant from the ink still drying on paper. Inside, velvet seats absorbed the low murmur of the crowd like thick forest soil soaking rain. Gilded box seats caught flickering candlelight, their reflections dancing across the ceiling frescoes. The scent of beeswax polish mixed with woolen coats and the faint sweetness of candied almonds. Wooden panels muffled the rustle of silk, gowns and linen shirts settling into place. A single tuning note floated up from the orchestra pit, pure and clear. Shadows softened the edges of every face turned toward the stage. The air held that cool stillness, unique to grand halls before music begins. Such spaces carried sound with remarkable clarity. Time slowed within those walls, measured by the turning of pages and the clink of saucers. Patrons settled into padded chairs, their silhouettes blurred by candle glow. Street lamps cast long shadows through tall windows onto worn floorboards. Gentle laughter punctuated the low hum of conversation near the hearth. Embers glowed softly in the grate, radiating warmth through the room. Waiters moved silently between small tables, clearing empty cups with practiced ease. The quiet anticipation felt almost sacred, a shared breath before the story unfolded. My work that night balanced intricate arias with melodies anyone might hum afterward. Blondchen and Osmin emerged from the orchestra's swell, their voices cutting through the hall like sunlight through clouds. Pedrillo's gardener disguise held comic charm, yet hinted at deeper longing beneath the surface. The exotic setting drew audiences in, its characters vibrant as painted tiles. Comic moments flowed naturally, into passages of genuine tenderness. This piece marked a crucial step toward understanding how music might carry both laughter and sorrow. Its success established my place within the imperial city immediately. The audience's applause that July 16th night felt like warm water after winter travel. Years later, I often sought refuge in a quiet coffee house near the Cade-Rentnerter Theater. One mild evening in the early 1780s, I sat nursing a cup of dark coffee. The porcelain felt cool against my fingers, its rim chipped from years of use. Newspapers lay open on nearby tables, ink smudging under patrons' fingertips. Sheet music pages turned gently in the warm air near the hearth. Roasted bean scent mingled with beeswax on the wooden floors. Carriage wheels faded into the city's nightly rhythm beyond the tall windows. Lauder rose softly among regulars discussing the latest concert. During London assessment, Barrington made me play with my eyes covered. I recall the smooth ivory keys beneath blindfolded fingers, the challenge sharp as a surgeon's blade. Such tests felt like childhood, games compared to the real journey. Travel between cities remained arduous, weeks spent on rough roads through German forests. I remembered the London visit of 1764, meeting Johann Christian Bach's gentle melodies. His influence settled into my earliest symphonies like dust motes in sunlight. Later trips to Mannheim and Paris shaped my understanding of wind instruments. Letters to my father documented those 1777 journeys, describing street sounds and inn smells. The political air grew tense. Despite surface calm across Europe, Joseph's policies shifted how music lived in people's daily lives. Public concerts multiplied throughout the 1780s, offering new paths beyond court halls. I organized my own performances, feeling the shift from patronage to public connection. The coffee house provided a space for reflection between such labors. Children's laughter echoed from the street outside the window. A street lamp's glow traced the grain of the wooden table before me. Time seemed measured by the turning of pages and the clink of saucers. Patrons sipped coffee while reading newspapers by candlelight. Warmth radiated from the hearth where embers glowed softly in the grate. Distant sounds of carriage wheels faded as the city settled into its rhythm. This room witnessed many 18th century musical innovations. Its simple elegance focused attention on artistic expression. The quiet hum of conversation filled the space like distant water. A small wooden stool stood before the instrument in my childhood apartment. Sunlight warmed the keys where tiny fingers practiced scales and minutes. The gentle rhythm of breathing from children resting nearby completed the scene. Such domestic spaces nurtured the first notes of genius. The childhood tours began when I was merely 7 years old. Carriages jolted over German roads, while I practiced minuets between stops. I performed for kings and queens across France and the Netherlands. Erythema nodosum flared during principalities' travel, pain like hot needles in my joints. London 1765 typhus confined me to bed for weeks, the room smelling of vinegar and herbs. Vienna's 1767 smallpox left scars and threatened my sight, the world blurred and painful. Yet music always called me back to the keyboard's familiar touch. The carriage wheels settled into the rhythm of homecoming after each illness. These journeys taught me to listen deeply to distant musical voices. The constant movement took its toll but broadened my musical vocabulary. I absorbed diverse styles like a sponge draws water from many streams. The road dust settled on my coat as I walked toward the next performance hall. Candlelight flickered across gilded box, seats, and deep red velvet upholstery. Wooden panels absorbed the murmur of the audience before the curtain rose. Shadows danced gently across ornate ceiling frescoes depicting classical scenes. The air remained cool and still within the grand space. This room witnessed the birth of many 18th century musical innovations. Its simple elegance provided a focused environment for artistic expression. The quiet anticipation before the music began felt almost sacred. The candlelight in Mozart's study casts long, quiet shadows across the worn wooden desk, where Constance mended my shirt sleeve with careful stitches. Her fingers moved steadily over the linen, the needle catching the soft glow, while snow whispered against the window panes. I watched the steady rise and fall of her breath, the faint scent of lavender soap lingering near the inkwell. My father's disapproval of our union had arrived months earlier in cramped handwriting, the paper brittle between my fingers. He questioned her family standing and worried over my future. Short sentences felt safest then. Letters grew sparse after our visit to Salzburg in 1783. A few survived beyond that journey home through frost-covered hills. The carriage wheels creaked beneath us as we left his house, Constanze's hand warm in mine. Constance kept our household running with quiet precision, balancing grocery lists scrawled on scrap paper beside my manuscript sketches. The smell of baking bread often mixed with rosin dust from my violin case in the corner. Money remained a constant companion, its presence felt in the careful counting of coins at month's end. I signed contracts for major works, with deliberate attention to payment terms, the ink drying slowly under lamplight. Lorenzo da Ponte and I shaped Don Giovanni together in his study, pages strewn across a table scarred by candle wax. He spoke the Italian text aloud while I hummed melodies, the phrases intertwining like threads in a tapestry. Haydn visited often, his laughter filling the room as we played quartets. On February 12, 1785, we performed the Dissonance, quartet for him in our rooms. the wood of my violin smooth beneath my chin. His praise later reached my father in a letter I never saw. A quiet room in Vienna holds the atmosphere of our later domestic life. Sunlight filters through tall windows onto a simple writing desk, its surface worn smooth by constant use. A single sheet of paper rests there, covered in precise, flowing script, the ink slightly smudged near the edge, where a hand might have paused in thought. The faint scent of beeswax polish mingles with the dry paper smell, and outside, the distant sound of carriage wheels on cobblestones provides a steady, unhurried rhythm. Dust motes drift slowly in the golden light, settling on an open book of philosophy beside an inkwell. The room feels suspended in time, holding the memory of focused work and quiet reflection. A space where complex ideas took shape in careful notation. Silence here is not empty but full of the residue of concentrated creation, a peaceful testament to disciplined daily habits. Health stayed steady for most of my life, the aches of travel fading by morning's light. Few serious illnesses marked the years from 1767 onward, allowing work to flow like a clear stream. My final year buzzed with activity, composing the clarinet concerto in October, conducting the magic flute in September, rehearsing La Clemenza di Tito in Prague. Constance managed household affairs while I scribbled letters to her during brief stays in other cities. The Requiem commission arrived with specific payment clauses I reviewed by candlelight, the quill scratching softly against parchment. She sat for Barbara Craft's oil portrait in 1819, wearing deep blue velvet under candlelight glow. The brushstrokes captured fine linen at her throat and thoughtful eyes. Another quiet room holds the memory of Constance's determination after I was gone. A single oil lamp casts a warm circle of light on a wooden table stacked with handwritten letters tied neatly with twine. The faint scent of aged paper and iron gall ink lingers in the cool air, mingling with beeswax from a half-used candle. Outside, Vienna's evening sounds fade into the distance, a distant church bell, the shuffle of footsteps on stone. Dust motes swirl gently in the lamplight, settling on an open ledger, where accounts were carefully tallied. The room feels heavy with absence yet full of purpose. A space where memories were preserved with steady hands. Silence here speaks of loyalty and quiet resolve, a testament to love that outlived its moment. She preserved nearly all my letters with Georg Nissen, her second husband, ensuring each page survived intact. Their careful work created a record richer than those left by Gluck or Haydn. I recall Constance reading my sister Nannerl's letters aloud, her voice soft in the evening dimness. The texture of daily life emerged through these pages. Market prices, rehearsal delays, the price of candles. My mind stayed clear until late November 1791, focused on musical lines even as weakness settled in my limbs. The final clarinet concerto manuscript shows no hesitation in the notation, the ink flowing steadily across the staff. Financial pressures eased somewhat in those last months, though bills still arrived weekly. Constanze's presence remained a steady anchor, her hand cool against my forehead during feverish nights. The sheer volume of work sustained felt ordinary then, just part of the day's rhythm. I conducted the magic flute with satisfaction, the audience's applause warm. In the theater's candlelit space, the quiet dignity of my final days matched the clarity of my finest music. Constanze kept vigil with steady calm, her breathing steady beside the bed. The room held the scent of chamomile tea and beeswax polish, familiar as childhood. I listened to the clock's gentle tick, feeling the weight of the blankets and the softness of the pillow beneath my head. No premonition shadowed those last weeks, only the work left unfinished. The Requiem's opening bars echoed in my mind, simple and profound. I signed contracts right up to September, the ink drying slowly on the page. The legacy she shaped afterward rests now in the careful preservation of notes and letters, each page a quiet testament to a life fully lived. Her hands, smoothing my sheet music long after I was gone, ensured the music never faded. Haydn's hands were always warm when we embraced, even in the coldest Viennese winters. His fingers smelled of pipe tobacco and rosin, the same scent clinging to the quartet. Scores he returned to me with careful annotations. I remember sitting at his small desk in the Esterházy Palace, the afternoon light catching dust motes above the inkwell. He called my new quartets children, and I felt a father's pride hearing them played in his rooms. The dedication page sat on my work table for weeks, the paper growing soft from handling, before I finally dipped the quill. Those 6 pieces traveled farther than I ever could, carried by musicians across borders I knew only through letters. Haydn treated each measure like a living thing, his bow-drawing sighs from the violins during our rehearsals. I once asked Nannerl to kiss Mama's hand 1 billion times. The ink still wet when I folded the letter. Such numbers felt true then, as real as the candle wax spotting. My sleeve, while composing late into the night, the city hummed with new possibilities beyond the old court chapels. A shift I felt in my bones. Public concerts filled halls where nobles rubbed elbows with merchants. The air thick with wool coats and spilled wine. I arranged my own performances at the Trattnerhof, counting coins after each show beneath a single oil lamp. The floorboards groaned under crowded feet, a sound like distant thunder rolling through the room. My piano concerto in D minor found its voice there, the opening notes cutting through the chatter like a knife through silk. Haydn's study held the quiet hum of a room where music lived and breathed. A single window overlooked a neglected garden where ivy clawed at cracked stone. His desk held a chipped ink pot beside a dried quill, the wood grain scarred by decades of restless fingers. Pipe smoke curled toward yellow, sheet music stacked in uneven piles, each page smelling faintly of beeswax and old paper. A metronome clicked steadily in the corner, its rhythm unchanged by storms or seasons, while dust settled on the spine of a well-thumbed treatise about harmony. The space felt worn like a favorite coat, holding the warmth of countless afternoons spent bending over violins. My days followed a rhythm as steady as a clockmaker's pendulum. Mornings brought hot coffee enough to stand a spoon in, the cup warming my palms before the ink froze on the page. Letters to Nannerl flowed between us like a secret river, our shared diary pages filled with doodles of birds and nonsense numbers. I described the texture of new violins, the sour tang of cheap wine at rehearsals, the way street lamps reflected on wet cobblestones after midnight. Yet even warmth could turn sharp. My pen sometimes scratched cruel words about rivals, phrases later softened by Constanzy's careful hand. Financial ledgers haunted my desk, numbers blurring after too many hours. A single concert might pay for bread, but rarely covered the rent on our cramped apartment. I'd trace the grain of the writing table, smooth where my wrist rested nightly, rough where the wood had splintered. The city's transformation was a slow tide, lifting some boats while sinking others. Composers now stood before audiences who paid coin for the privilege, their applause a tangible thing like rain on a roof. I signed contracts for feats like playing blindfolded, my fingers finding keys by memory alone, while judges scribbled notes in the silence. Barrington's testimony felt unnecessary, yet the paper mattered to patrons who needed proof beyond sound. The trunk, holding my sister's letters, sat beneath the bed, its leather straps brittle with age. Opening it released the scent of dried lavender and river water from her journey home. One page showed her careful script describing a yellow bird that visited her windowsill. The ink faded to pale brown where raindrops had fallen. I ran my thumb over the creases where she'd folded it tightly, imagining her breath catching as she wrote. The paper felt thin as onion skin, rough at the edges from constant handling, holding traces of candle smoke and the cold Viennese air she'd braved to post it. A single hair, fine as spider silk, lay trapped between the sheets, a relic of moments otherwise lost to time. Hayden's laughter was a low rumble, the sound of stones shifting in a creek bed after rain. He taught me that silence between notes could hold more weight than the music itself. We'd share bread and cheese after playing, the crust scraping my teeth while he spoke of counterpoint as if it were weather. My quartets found safe harbor in his care, each performance a new chapter in their journey. The public halls demanded spectacle, but his rooms demanded truth. I'd watch his hands move across the strings, calloused and sure, while moonlight silvered the floorboards. Later, counting pennies by candlelight, I'd recall how Haydn's warmth made even failure feel temporary. His friendship was a steady flame in drafty rooms, a constant amid the shifting currents of this transformed city. The scent of his pipe tobacco still lingers in my memory, a ghost of comfort in the quiet hours before dawn. The Burgtheater stage felt cool beneath my bare feet that July evening in 1780, too. Velvet seats absorbed the murmur of Vienna's nobility settling in their gilded boxes. I smelled beeswax from the chandeliers mixing with the damp wool of evening coats. Blanchen adjusted her apron beside me, while Osmond's deep voice rumbled near the painted palm trees. Pedrillo handed me a gardener's rake as the orchestra tuned below. My fingers remembered the weight of the K. 38, fourscore in my hand that morning. The first notes rose like steam from hot stones after rain. Belmonte's aria carried across the hall, clear as river water over smooth pebbles. I watched the audience lean forward, their faces softened by candlelight. The story unfolded with garden shears and locked towers, laughter and longing. Constanze's English maid sang of home with a voice like cracked porcelain. Osmond stomped his boot heel on the wooden planks. The music wrapped around each, word like smoke around a flame. It felt right to place this tale in a pasha's garden far from home. The exotic spices in the air were imagined but real to us. We moved through the plot like figures in a clockwork toy. My melodies balanced on the edge of complexity and song. They carried both singer and listener forward without stumbling. The hall held its breath during Blanchen's high notes. Then applause broke like summer thunder across the room. Success tasted like stale bread and strong coffee backstage. A single candle burns low in a brass holder on the dark cherry desk. Quills rest beside an open inkwell, its surface still and deep as a pond at midnight. Several sheets of manuscript paper lie smoothed upon the wood, covered in precise black notation. The faint scent of iron gall ink mingles with beeswax from the flame. Outside the window, footsteps fade on cobblestone streets. Shadows dance gently across the walls, moving with the candle's gentle pulse. Cool air carries the weight of thoughtful creation. This space embodies the unhurried focus necessary for profound work. Figaro followed 4 years later, its story woven through servant corridors and silk gowns. The Countess traced lace patterns on her dressing table while Figaro measured the garden wall. I felt the tension in the air like humidity before a storm. The music flowed through arguments over wedding beds and misplaced letters. Navigating those social currents required careful attention to every voice. The servants moved through rooms with trays of lemonade and quiet judgments. Their words carried weight equal to the noble's declarations. I shaped each area to reveal hidden currents beneath polite conversation. The orchestra mirrored the rustle of silk and the scrape of chairs. Figaro's anger vibrated in the cello strings like a plucked wire. Susanna's wit danced in the flute's quick phrases. Audiences leaned in during the garden scene's whispered confessions. Laughter came soft as crumpled paper, then swelled like rising bread. The piece held Vienna captive through its entire run. Patrons discussed its meaning over steaming bowls of soup afterwards. Its success felt like finding solid ground after crossing thin ice. Don Giovanni arrived after Prague, welcomed me with open arms. I entered it simply as opera buffa in my private ledger. The designation seemed too small for such darkness and light. The Estates Theatre in Prague held a quiet dignity on that October night. Green velvet seats absorbed the audience's expectant silence. Oil lamps cast soft light across the ornate proscenium arch. I smelled aged wood and fresh paint as the overture began. Leporello's sigh echoed in the high ceiling like wind through stone corridors. The statue's voice rumbled from the pit, deep as cellar stones. Donna Anna's grief carried the sharp scent of crushed violets. Giovanni's charm felt warm as spilled wine on a tavern floor. The final scene unfolded with cold precision, no easy resolution. The music wrapped around moral questions like ivy on a wall. Prague's response felt immediate, profound, and deeply personal. The theater's acoustics carried every note to the back rows with clarity. Patrons left wrapped in heavy coats, talking in hushed tones. Wooden beams formed a vaulted ceiling above Prague's main auditorium. Rich green velvet covered the seats, where patrons sat in attentive silence. Oil lamps cast a soft golden light across the ornate proscenium arch. The scent of aged wood and fresh paint lingered in the cool air. Outside the tall windows, the Vltava River flowed quietly beneath moonlight. Patrons' footsteps echoed softly on the stone floors before the performance. The stage backdrop depicted classical architectural elements in muted colors. Gentle drafts carried the faint sound of distant church bells. This space provided a stable foundation for artistic creation. Its proportions ensured every voice carried clearly to the back rows. The theater's history held layers of previous performances. Such environments nurtured both performers and audiences. The quiet dignity supported the music's emotional weight. I returned to Vienna composing symphonies that carried the same G minor tonality as earlier works. The structure felt like tracing familiar pathways through dense forest. Each section unfolded with purpose, no note wasted or misplaced. Balancing emotional depth with formal precision required patience. The music absorbed the quiet discipline of my childhood practice. String quartets followed, written without patron request or expectation. I crafted all four voices simultaneously at the cherry desk, quill scratching steadily. The ink left a bitter tang on my fingertips each evening. Haydn's influence guided my hand like a steady companion. These pieces demanded equal attention to every instrument's voice. They revealed conversations between instruments, not mere accompaniment. The process felt closer to architecture than decoration. Figaro and Don Giovanni remain central to the repertoire today. Their notes still carry the scent of candle wax and velvet. I remember the cool stage floor beneath my feet, the weight of the score. The journey from Salzburg's narrow street to these grand halls felt complete. The boy at his father's harpsichord had found his place in the world. Creation required solitude, patience, and quiet attention to detail. The foundation laid during childhood, travels enabled everything that followed. My life became a continuous cycle of learning, performing, and composing. The music flowed through me like water finding its course. It carried both joy and sorrow with equal measure. The final notes always resolved into calm acceptance. Sleep comes easier remembering these things with clear eyes. The crisp Viennese air carried the scent of chestnut blossoms through my open window as I shaped Papageno's flute melodies in late 1791. My quill scratched steadily across the manuscript paper, the inkwell leaving a faint blue stain on my third finger. Emanuel Schikaneder's voice drifted up from the courtyard below, testing a new lyric for the Queen of the Night. I recall the grain of the wooden desk beneath my palms, smooth from years of revision, and the way candles smoke curled toward the ceiling after midnight. The theater folk gathered at Freyhaus, their laughter mixing with the clink of beer mugs as we refined the libretto. Travel weariness lingered in my shoulders from earlier journeys, but composing this opera felt like returning to clear water after a dusty road. I conducted the premiere on the 30th of September with deep satisfaction, watching the audience lean forward when the three boys appeared in their starry robes. A fishmonger from the Nashmarkt hummed Papageno's tune while delivering eels to our kitchen the very next morning. My final public appearance came early, in November for the clarinet concerto, the hall's warmth barely touching the chill in my hands as I raised the baton. Vienna's streets glistened with November rain the day I last stepped onto a stage. Carriage wheels splashing through puddles on the way home. A small study in Vienna holds only a writing desk and a single chair by the window. Dust motes dance in the late afternoon. Sunbeam cutting across the scarred oak surface. The desk smells of dried ink and the beeswax Constance uses on the floorboards. A cracked porcelain inkwell sits beside a sheaf of handwritten notes, edges softened by frequent handling. The street sounds below, cart wheels, distant church bells, muffle into a steady hum. My quill rests beside a half-finished area, the nib catching the light. The room breathes with quiet concentration, holding space for melodies that have yet to find their voice. No ornamentation distracts from the work, only the texture of paper and wood grain beneath my fingers remains. Constance noticed the fatigue first, the way my coat sleeves grew tight around my wrists after the clarinet concerto performance. By the 20th of November, a fever took root, sharp and unyielding, while painful swelling rose in my legs like floodwater. I lay propped on pillows, the rough linen sheets scratching my skin, listening to Constanze's footsteps in the hallway as she fetched cool cloths. Friends arrived with honeyed tea, their voices hushed as they set bowls on the bedside table. My thoughts stayed clear even as the edema tightened my joints, each morning revealing new puffiness beneath my nightshirt. S.U. Smer came close to the bed, his shadow falling across the requiem pages spread between us. We spoke of the lacrimosa measures, my voice thin but precise, tracing the notation with a trembling finger. The room held the sour tang of vinegar poultices Constance applied to my ankles. 15 days measured the fever's course from that first chill to the final quiet. Snow began falling outside on the 4th of December, soft flakes catching in the street lamp glow. I felt the weight of my limbs growing distant, like stones sinking in deep water. Constanze's hand stayed in mine, her thumb rubbing slow circles on my knuckle. The city observed my passing with quiet respect, church bells tolling softly across the frozen streets. Dawn on the 5th brought a stillness deeper than sleep, the bed covers smooth and cool against my cheek. A sick room in Vienna holds only a narrow bed and a small table near the window. Winter light filters through frost-rimmed glass, illuminating the hollows beneath a patient's eyes. The air carries the bitter scent of willow bark, tea and the faint metallic hint of dried blood. A wool blanket lies crumpled at the foot of the bed, its coarse weave visible in the pale light. The sound of a ticking clock blends with shallow breathing, each inhale a quiet struggle. A porcelain cup rests on the table, steam long vanished, beside a folded handkerchief. Dust motes swirl in the cold air above the bed frame. The room holds no grand gestures, only the slow rhythm of a failing heart and the weight of unfinished work. A single feather from a torn pillow drifts near the floorboards. The Requiem manuscript lay open on my desk that autumn, its notes whispering in the candlelight as S.U. Smer copied my sketches into clean ink. My knuckles ached with each stroke of the quill, the swelling beneath the skin hot and tight as a ripe plum. Vienna's chill seeped through the window panes, carrying the distant clatter of hooves on cobblestones into my study. I worked through November's damp, the fever burning low in my bones like banked coals. S.U. Smer's quill scratched steadily beside me, the sound a familiar rhythm against the silence of my breath catching in my throat. The city moved outside, unaware of the quiet struggle within these walls. I felt the end approaching with the calm of one who has sung every note life offered. My final letters to Constance spoke only of household matters and the weather. December's first dawn found me still holding the manuscript page. Sunlight falls gently across small private library in late afternoon. Leather-bound volumes line simple wooden shelves reaching towards a high ceiling. A single armchair sits beside a low table holding an open book. The pages show handwritten marginalia in a careful script. A quill pen rests atop sheet of music manuscript paper nearby. Dust particles dance slowly in the warm golden light from the window. The scent of old paper and beeswax fills the quiet space. A soft breeze moves the sheer curtains slightly, rustling the loose pages. The room holds the quiet residue of deep intellectual engagement. Every object rests exactly where it was left, suspended in time. This space embodies the calm pursuit of knowledge that sustained me. Modern scholars now measure the exact angle of sunlight through that same window at 3 o'clock. The burial followed 2 days later in a common grave. No ceremony, but the quiet respect of neighbors. Constance arranged the simple coffin with care, her hands steady despite the tears. I heard the church bells toll my passing through the thin walls of the room where I breathed my last. Vienna's streets held an unusual hush that afternoon, as if the city itself paused to listen. The sudden absence of my music left a space no other sound could fill. My final composition stood complete, each note placed with intention until the very end. This Jupiter symphony had already sung its last triumphant chord months before. My letters to Nannerl spoke of teaching a new pupil in Prague. The ink blotted where my hand trembled. The clarinet concerto manuscript still smelled of fresh parchment when I set it aside. I conducted the magic flute in September, the theater's candlelight warm on my face as the audience applauded. S.U. Smer brought broth each morning, the bowl cool against my fevered palms. Constance sat by my bedside, her sewing needle flashing in the lamplight. I traced the Requiem's Lacrimosa in the air with my finger, feeling the melody flow through me. The city observed my passing without fanfare, as was the custom for many citizens. My name appeared in no grand obituary, only a brief notice in the local gazette. Scholars now know my medical records showed only one severe illness in 24 years. The quiet dignity of those final days matched the clarity of my finest scores. Sunlight filters through tall windows onto a simple writing desk, its surface worn smooth by constant use. A single sheet of paper rests there, covered in precise, flowing script, the ink slightly smudged near the edge, where a hand might have paused in thought. The faint scent of beeswax polish mingles with the dry paper smell, and outside, The distant sound of carriage wheels on cobblestones provides a steady, unhurried rhythm. Dust motes drift slowly in the golden light, settling on an open book of philosophy beside an inkwell. The room feels suspended in time, holding the memory of focused work and quiet reflection. Silence here is not empty, but full of the residue of concentrated creation. This space witnessed my last annotations to the Requiem's Confutatis. Constans preserved every fragment I left behind, the loose sheets now housed in a fireproof cabinet. My music spread quickly beyond Vienna's borders, carried by travelers on dusty roads. The mystery surrounding the Requiem deepened with each passing year, its incomplete sections inviting speculation. I felt no fear in composing those final measures, only the weight of the work itself. The sheer volume of notes I produced in my last months remains astonishing to those who study the timelines. The Burgtheater in Vienna held a quiet dignity during evening performances. Candlelight flickered across gilded box, seats and deep red velvet upholstery. Wooden panels absorbed the murmur of the audience before the curtain rose. The scent of beeswax polish mingled with the faint aroma of woolen coats. Patrons settled into padded chairs, their silhouettes softened by the warm glow. Distant sounds of carriage wheels faded as the hall grew still. A single tuning note resonated from the orchestra pit below. Shadows danced gently across ornate ceiling frescoes depicting classical scenes. The air remained cool and still within the grand space. This room witnessed the birth of many 18th century musical innovations. Its simple elegance provided focused environment for artistic expression. The theater's acoustics carried every note with remarkable clarity. Such spaces fostered a shared experience between performers and listeners. The quiet anticipation before the music began felt almost sacred. I conducted there often, the wooden floorboards creaking beneath my feet. My beliefs were shaped by the books lining these shelves, their pages turned by my own hands. I read Locke by candlelight, the ink smudging under my fingertips. The Enlightenment's ideas flowed through me like a steady river, informing every decision. My letters to Leopold spoke of nothing but travel arrangements and rehearsal schedules. The survival of these small papers allows others to glimpse my ordinary days. My final year involved teaching, composing, and tending to household accounts with steady hands. The fever took hold slowly, a persistent guest refusing to leave. I completed the Masonic cantata just weeks before the end, the ink still wet on the page. Constanza's quiet strength held our home together through those final weeks. The common grave held no shame, only the dignity of shared earth. Vienna's soil received me as it did countless others that winter. My name variations, Amadeus, Amadeus, reflect the shifting borders of my world. The silence after my death was brief, soon filled by the echo of my own notes. My presence continues through the vibration of strings and the turn of pages. Every performance carries the residue of that last breath. The city has long since moved on, yet the music remains. The fever burned steadily through my bones that December morning as I lay beneath rough wool blankets in the small Vienna room. S.U. Smear's careful hand copied my final notes for the Requiem while candlelight flickered across the manuscript paper. I heard the distant chime of St. Stephen's clock marking 4 hours, past midnight on the 5th. My legs ached with swollen joints that felt hot even through the linen sheets. Constance brought vinegar cloths that smelled sharp and medicinal against my forehead. The city outside slept under a thin layer of frost on the window ledge. 2 days later, they carried me to burial without ceremony. The burial register listed me as Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Common graves were standard practice for citizens without noble rank. Vienna observed my passing with quiet respect in hushed conversations at coffee houses. The sudden absence of my music left an audible silence in concert halls and palaces. I had finished the Jupiter Symphony months before, its final chords clear in my mind. The Requiem remained incomplete, but S.U. Smear would later assemble it from my sketches. Constance's hands were gentle as she arranged my few possessions in the dim room. She spoke softly of our children's future while tending the stove's low embers. The scent of beeswax candles mixed with the medicinal herbs steeping on the hearth. Distant sleigh bells echoed through the frozen streets after my burial. My compositions eventually numbered over 600. Scholars would one day trace every marginal note in my manuscripts. Sunlight falls gently across a small private library in late afternoon. Leather-bound volumes line simple wooden shelves reaching toward a high ceiling. A single armchair sits beside a low table holding an open book. The pages show handwritten marginalia in a careful script. A quill pen rests atop sheet of music manuscript paper nearby. Dust particles dance slowly in the warm golden light from the window. The scent of old paper and beeswax fills the quiet space. A soft breeze moves the sheer curtains slightly, rustling the loose pages. Every object rests exactly where it was left, suspended in time. This space embodies the calm pursuit of knowledge that sustained me. The silence here feels deep and undisturbed, welcoming contemplation. I remember Constance reading letters from home beside this very window. Her voice carried the cadence of Salzburg streets and childhood memories. The letters spoke of Leopold's concern and Nannerl's piano practice. My final year held both creative labor and domestic worries about rent payments. I composed until the fever made my hands tremble too much for the quill. The city's musicians played my works without knowing they were farewells. My name appeared in concert programs across Prague and Leipzig after my death. Constance traveled tirelessly to secure performances and support our sons. The mystery surrounding the Requiem deepened its emotional impact over decades. Modern scholars still examine the precise strain of bacteria in my fever. My death at 35 felt premature, yet the music flowed abundantly. The quiet dignity of my final days matched the clarity of my finest scores. Letters to Constance revealed affection through discussions of household linen and children's shoes. I signed my correspondence Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a name shifting like the wind. The Jupiter Symphony's counterpoint remained unbroken until the end. Vienna's streets held no grand procession for my burial, only common practice. My music spread far beyond the city's borders with remarkable speed. The sudden silence after my death was palpable in coffeehouse conversations. Constance preserved my legacy through relentless dedication and careful accounting. Every composition carried the resonance of lived experience, not fear. The swellings in my legs subsided